Hi everyone, this is Mrs. J, and I'm doing a read aloud of Thunder Rolling in the Mountains by Scott Odell and Elizabeth Hall. We're on Chapter 19, page 103. Our warriors fought the rest of the day and the next. They fought with new anger. Chief Joseph had not been treated as an honored prisoner. The Bluecoats tied his hands behind him, then tied his hands to his feet, then rolled him in a blanket like a papoose. He could not stand. He could not walk. He could not use his arms. The white soldier slept in a tent, but my father lay all night beside the mules without food or water. He was not untied until the paper that speaks came from the soldier Jerome. 2 sons came and went. We had lost no people since the first day of battle, but food was short. Soon even children would have to go hungry. We were cold and wet with snow. The cruel wind cut to our very bones. The children cried. The women and old men said nothing, but there were pain in their eyes. The 3rd son was a sad time for us. The sadness began in the morning, when it grew light and we saw that a party of white soldiers had arrived during the darkness. The one-armed general had joined Colonel Miles. The army of bluecoats would soon spread across the land. When the shooting began that morning, the first shells fell among us. During the night, the white soldiers had dug a trench for their cannon, and the shells no longer struck the bluffs beyond the rifle pits. Another act of shame. The soldier Jerome knew that no warriors were in the shelter pits. Again, they warred on the helpless. Shells fell among the women and children, and the old men and the wounded warriors. 1 shell burst in the shelter pit, covering 6 of our people with earth. We dug fast, scooping away the choking dirt with pots and hats in our hands. I pulled a small boy from the pit. His eyes and ears and mouth were full of the earth as he gasped for air, but he was safe. The others dragged 3 women to safety, but they could not reach an old woman and her granddaughter. There was too much dirt. Without air, they died. My father said we were beaten. The time had come to surrender. Not everyone agreed. Some of the warriors wanted to charge the Bluecoats. They said that the Bluecoats were bad fighters. We might whip them and be free to join Sitting Bull. They would be glad to die for the people. My father said no. We could not fight the cannon, and there were too many soldiers. All of our warriors would die, and then the women and children and old men would be at the mercy of the Bluecoats. My father reminded them of what had happened to the women and children at Big Hole. It would be better to return to Lapwai and live on the reservation. Looking Glass said he would never surrender. He looked at my father. I am older than you, he said. I know the white generals are men with 2 faces and 2 tongues. If you surrender, you will be sorry. It is better to be dead. Whitebird held up his hand. Looking Glass speaks the truth, he said. Surrender if you wish. We will not stop you. We will take those who would rather die and strike out for the old lady's country. The council broke up. The sadness was not yet over. A rider on horseback appeared in the distance. Looking Glass believed it was a Sioux scout, part of the band from Sitting Bull. He stepped out of his rifle pit for a closer look. A bullet struck him in the head, and he fell and sprawled and silent on the ground. We lost another chief. Now only my father and Whitebird were left to lead us. My father was not a war chief, and Whitebird was old. Under the white flag, my father crossed the plain to the camp of the Bluecoats. The day was gray, and he was wrapped in a gray blanket. His head was down. His rifle lay across the saddle. Wearily, he climbed from his horse and walked up to Colonel Miles. Let us stop fighting, said Colonel Miles. No more battles, no more blood. The one-armed general was beside him. Ice crystals clung to his beard. The war is over, he said. I have lost brothers. Many of you have lost brothers. Do not worry more. It is time for us to rest. Even with his head bowed, my father towered over General Howard. He drew his blanket closer about him and then nodded, but did not speak. Colonel Miles said that he had plenty of food and would warm blankets for us. He promised that he would take our people to a nearby camp for the winter. Then we could all go back to our old homes. The one-armed general watched Chief Joseph and Colonel Miles shake hands. Then my father walked back to his pony and picked up his rifle. General Howard reached for it. Chief Joseph pulled back the hand holding the gun. He stood very tall. He looked down at the one-armed general. I am not surrendering to you, he said. He pointed to Colonel Miles. This is the man that ran me down. My father turned to Colonel Miles and he handed him the gun, butt first. Then he stepped back. I am tired of fighting, he said. Our chiefs are killed. Looking Glass is dead. The old men are all killed. He who led the young men is dead. It is cold and we have no blankets. The little children are freezing to death. My people, some of them, have run away into the hills, and have no blankets, no food, and no one knows where they are, perhaps freezing to death. I want time to look for my children and see how many of them I could find. Maybe I shall find them among the dead." He raised his arm. His blanket flapped in the raw wind. "Hear me, my chiefs," he called. "I am tired. My heart is sick and sad. From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more forever." In sorrow, he drew his blanket over his head. One by one, our warriors stepped up from the rifle pits and filed across the plain. They laid their rifles on the ground in front of the generals. From the shelter pits came the women and children, followed by the old. Wounded warriors crawled from the pits. Some of them leaned on the women and old men. Some of them crawled on their hands and knees. Slowly, the long lines of people moved across the ground and up the hill. My heart filled with sadness. I could not join them. Even when I saw dear women trudge slowly up the hill bearing Bending Willow on her back, I could not join them.